Good evening, folks. Oh, or whatever you are. This week's topic is Doctor Who. We'll start with, as we always start, we'll start with Zach because he hasn't been here a few weeks, and that's our earliest memories of the current topic. So, Zach, your earliest memories of Doctor Who.
Oh, this is one night. So my father, sometimes he couldn't sleep very well at night, heartburn or backaches.
Mm.
So what he did was he would actually sit up and watch TV.
hmm
Well, what happened was one night I come out there and I happen to turn. He's sitting on the he's just sitting in his chair like this watching, and I turn and on TV is a trash can. Well, Maddie, your microphone's off. Oh,
He knows. He does it
ow,
so in case he's typing, it
ow.
doesn't go to his video.
Okay. Uh,
And I also eat a
ah,
lot of chocolate and make a lot of noise.
okay. I wasn't sure. I
Anyway,
haven't been here in a couple of weeks, so basically, I turn and look at the TV, and I see a trash can with a plunger sticking out of it, and what looks like a little laser weapon, and then it has this like really weird rotating top covered in bubbles, and I'm just like, I'm looking at this, and it's the weirdest thing I've seen, and I'm only 8 years old. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. And there's this man with a brown coat on, curly hair out to here, with a multicolored scarf, like hiding from it. And I turned to my dad and I'm just like, Dad, what's this? He goes, Oh, well, this is called Doctor Who. It's this British sci-fi show, and that's all I ever knew about it
right.
until until I was like 15 when I actually saw my very first full episode.
And that was Eccleston.
Yeah, my very first episode was when I saw Eccleston.
Are you my mummy?
Yeah, it would be the very first episode I ever saw.
Nice.
Watching it
Well,
at night in a friend's basement with only one
nice.
light on.
That's a good episode to start on, if that's the case. Right, Maddie, over to you.
Well, I came from my extended family. I spent a lot of time with my uncle growing up, which I've mentioned before, but I spent a lot of time with him because he was still in high school when I was young. And my grandmother's always been a big BBC fan. So my childhood TV memories are fairly biased towards BBC shows, and most of my nights were spent watching things like Inspector Morse and Heartbeat and all these kind of things. So Doctor Who has always been part of my life, and I think when I was young, I was in an extreme minority. Because we're talking, this is the late 80s, early 90s, where there was no Doctor Who, and Doctor Who was only on reruns.
hmm
And so you only knew Doctor Who heritage show, vintage show, that there was never going to be any modern fandangled versions of it that we didn't expect that. So my earliest Doctor is, I'm fairly sure, he was my original favourite Doctor, probably because he was my earliest, so I can't say for certain, but that's Peter Davison. And the white suit and the celery stick and all that lovely stuff, the golf uniform, it's just so quintessentially British.
Cricket.
I thought it was fantastic. It had a little bit of the Monty Python-esque humour, but he was still very British, and I absolutely loved it. I don't remember the conditions that were surrounding my viewing. I don't remember particularly which episodes I saw first. The original, the first Doctor Who stories, cricket, not golf, actually were novels. I remember reading the novels at a young age, more than I actually remember the storylines of the shows, although I know I watched the shows, but I remember the stories of the novels a lot more. And the novels that I read spanned all generations of the Doctor. It wasn't a specific, this is the latest novel out, let's go buy it, let's get a set of, 7 novels of the one Doctor. They were just random purchases. I'm not even sure they were purchased for me. They very well could have belonged to my uncle. But yeah, so that's my earliest memories. So cricket slacks, celery sticks, and little skinny novels like this. But I've been a Doctor Who fan longer than it was cool, and probably a little bit more obsessive than most. Even the fangirls of now are probably not as obsessive as I was.
Right, onto me. I grew up, because my dad's a fan of sci-fi and fantasy, so I just grew up with Doctor Who in the house. So I grew up with 3, 4, and 5, John Pertwee, Tom Baker, and Peter Davison. I don't remember my first regeneration because, again, they were all just on television all the time and they were always watched. So I sort of grew up, when I saw a regeneration, I knew which Doctor was coming next. So I was very excited as a young boy when there was a regeneration I hadn't seen before, and regenerated into Colin Baker, probably my least favorite Doctor. He's the sort of, his character, you really need to give him a chance. Like, you really need to wait it out. Okay, this guy, by the time you get to X story, he actually is a decent portrayal of the Doctor. Then again, as Maddie was saying, here in Australia, we got the reruns. And we got the Sylvester McCoy reruns sort of in the early 90s after it had already been cancelled in Britain in 1989. So I was over the moon that the Doctor I didn't like had regenerated. I just turned it on and happened to catch it like, oh my god, Doctor Who, a new Doctor Who, and a completely new Doctor. I was over the moon. That's Sylvester McCoy, of course. Then, of course, there's your gap up until 1996 where you get the Paul McGann telly movie. Which, how's this? It didn't get picked up for a series because in the US ratings, it only ranked number 2 for that week. I mean, 2 out of 10, that's pretty good. But almost you'd think it was better that it didn't get picked up, looking at it, how far technology's come from then to now in terms of CGI and such. And then 2005 comes up and I'm all over it. But talking about the novels, I did have 1 or 2, but they ended up being my cousins because he is a fan, and I mean fanatic in the true sense of the word, probably even more so than Matter. Imagine this wall here was not trains, but Doctor Who posters. And not a single, it wasn't like a poster here and a poster there. It was side by side, top to bottom posters of Doctor Who and all Doctor Who related things.
Damn.
Also, there was some Back to the Future in there as well. But he'd read all of the novels. I know it annoyed his mother because he was only read Doctor Who novels, but then my mother said, it doesn't matter, he's still reading. Like, the important thing is that he's reading. It doesn't matter what he's reading. That is that he's reading. And that's my story of my earliest. Now, Zach has told me, Maddie, that he didn't catch... He's seen 2 of Eccleston and 2 of Tennant and none of Smith, and he didn't catch the most recent episode.
Right.
So you've got the most...
I've actually seen more of Eccleston. After I said that, I realized I actually watched a few more Eccleston because they actually, back when they were doing, because in the States you either have cable and you get to see Doctor Who regularly, or you wait for them to air on the public broadcasting station at 9:30 at night.
Right.
So I had actually seen they were actually airing them, and so I saw like a couple more in the Netflix. Praise be. They had 9, 10. They've been like 9 and 10, but now they're starting to get 11. And so I started using that as I wanted to get caught up, but then I realized I had like 200 episodes of backlog. So I was just like,
200 episodes, and that's if you go with the truncated version that starts in 2005.
Yeah. So I was just like...
It is a good place to start, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, we're just starting this episode as we start every episode, and that's with our earliest memories of that topic. And we've all been, so it's your turn, your earliest memories of Doctor Who.
Right. Well, can you just, for the sake of me knowing what we're talking about, give me the very briefest version of it? Like, you guys all watch this show, right?
Zach's probably the least out of the loop, the most out of the loop, rather.
Right.
I've been watching it since I was a kid. Maddie's been reading more of the novels since he was a kid.
Oh, wow.
Like, I've never stopped watching it, and I've read maybe one or two of the novels. Maddie's a huge reader.
Yeah.
I grew up with it where there was no point in my life where it was like, son, this is Doctor Who. I've just grown up. It's always been there. There was no point in my life where Doctor Who was new. And it seems that way with Maddie as well. Yeah, Zach, go while Dave's eating.
When we get there, there actually are a couple of fan works of Doctor Who that I'm quite familiar with, but when we get to that bridge, I'll mention that. So.
Okay. Well, okay. My first memory of Doctor Who, similarly, it was always there because I was born into a world that still had Doctor Who in it. I believe Colin Baker was on when I was either born or certainly when I became cognizant. And so my first memory of watching Doctor Who was Colin Baker stepping out of his TARDIS and realizing that he has stepped into sinking sand, into quicksand, and that he's sinking. And I think that might have been his last story.
Trial of a Time Lord.
That was it, right? Well, but the context of that is that I already knew him quite well, so I'd obviously been watching it for a while, just not forming memories. So my strongest sort of first Doctor Who memory is the first McCoy episode. I remember the excitement of his regeneration. Not so much. I don't remember being like, wow, a regeneration or anything like that. I just remember, oh, this new one. This is Doctor Who now. And I remember the whole thing of him looking in the mirror and going, is that my face? And things like that. So that episode is really my first memory. But what that meant was that Sylvester McCoy's first series was contemporary with my first year at school. And so a very keen early memory of Doctor Who is the fact that we used to play it on the playground. And we developed our own sort of playground version of Doctor Who, in which my friend Andrew Hodges was the Doctor, and he was a very good Doctor. And I believe he may even have had a scarf at the time. And I was a Dalek. No, sorry, I was a Cyberman. Now, the way to be a Cyberman, let me show you. Here's how to be a Cyberman, and I don't know why, I don't know how I came up with this. It just seemed like the natural thing to do. The way to be a Cyberman is by doing this. See? That's how to be a Cyberman. And, you know, in the same way that to be a Dalek, you sort of stick one arm out in front of you and trundle about. And so that was sort of the playground version of Doctor Who. But this led to a spin-off that I was very, very keen on. I preferred this game to Doctor Who. There was a group of girls who were in very much the sort of teacher's pet set at the time. As you know, we were 5 years old, and they were having some kind of sort of Victorian-feeling tea party game. You know, a kind of a sort of a Pride and Prejudice bent to their playground. It wouldn't have been to do with that explicitly because we were 5 years old, but it was that sort of thing. It was, oh, will you pass the tea? Certainly, type thing. So I invaded this game in the form of a Dalek. And to their immense credit, they played along. And so we developed a little game together where there would be the tea party, and then a Dalek would attack, and then at random intervals, and I remember being very careful to make it random. So sometimes it would go against me, sometimes it would be just when I was about to get them. The Dalek would become lost in the fog because, of course, this was Victorian London. And there was fog everywhere. How we knew this, I don't know. I must have seen an episode. There must have been an episode of Doctor Who that I was basing this on. I don't know. And so this Dalek, myself, would roll around going, "Lost in the fog, lost in the fog," and that was how they knew they could get away. So there you go. That was how we 5-year-olds responded to Sylvester McCoy. I guess that's my earliest memory.
Right, just talking about playing with your friends in the playground there. Actually, first talking about Lost in the Fog, there is a Tom Baker story, The Talons of Weng Chiang, which is one of the most famous ones. It's one of the most famous stories and is set in Victorian London.
Do Daleks get lost in the fog in it?
There's no Daleks in this particular story. It's
they missed the trick there.
Robot. Playing with friends. A cousin... Going back to this cousin that I mentioned before that had a wall of Doctor Who posters in his house that he lived at when we were kids. The entrance into the house, you'd be presented with like a phone booth kind of a thing, and one entrance went off into the kitchen, and that entrance went off into the living room. But it was like the phone was sealed off in its own little room. So that became the TARDIS.
Mm-hmm.
We would take turns at being the Doctor or the companion. Excuse me. And that's basically it for what I...
You know, it's funny.
Yep.
It's funny. I don't remember the concept of a companion until I was, until quite a bit later when I finally twigged, sort of Ace. I remember Ace. But I didn't realise that the Doctor always has a companion. It's weird that I didn't twig to that. There we were in the playground, not feeling the need to recruit a companion at all. It was just the Doctor. It was just Doctor Who.
Fair enough.
Is there a point in the earlier series where they refer to them as companions, or is that a modern construct?
They were assistants in the early series.
Assistants, right. That's a less... They obviously didn't put as much effort into marketing that word, which is why it hasn't stuck in my mind so much, because they've definitely taken the idea of companion, and through the clever marketing, it's become that word has become associated with Doctor Who now.
True, but
for me.
Also, the connotation of the assistant, it's like, this is the Doctor, here's the assistant. With companion, it's like they're on equal footing. But also, the companion is the human, it's the audience. So here's this weird alien traveling around in a magic box. But like, how are we supposed to relate to that? So there's your companion or assistant or whatever. So the audience can relate to the Doctor through the human companions, which I personally don't see the need for. So are we all caught up with the most current episode?
Oh, yes, but just before we go into that, actually, I've just remembered another memory that is quite important to me, and which I can impress you with an interesting flourish at the end of.
Okay.
And it goes like this. When I was about 7, Doctor Who had probably finished by that time. Just. What year did it finish?
1989.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in that case, yes, it would have finished about then. But what that means is that my whole life, essentially, I'd only known one version of the theme tune, which was the last version, the Sylvester McCoy version. And so I knew the tune, but I wasn't really fully aware of how it's changed over the years. Well, one day, I was in the local library with my mum, and just recently, I got into the fact that they have records there, have children's LPs on a Turny Roundy thing. And I found this one, which was like sort of kids' TV theme tunes. But there was something about this record that just made me have to hear it. So we borrowed the record from the library, and we took it home, and as was my custom in those days, not realizing that there was anything wrong with this, I immediately copied it onto a tape to keep forever. And now this little act of subterfuge, we may say now that that was piracy, but the fact of the matter is, that is a tape that I've loved my whole life. And when I one day find the CD copy that they did have at the library, but I've never found any mention of it, I will, of course, purchase it. But anyway, this tape or record was just sufficiently old that it did something interesting to me. It kind of, I guess, opened my eyes for one of the first times to the fact that there were children before me. You know, suddenly it was palpable and real that not, because you know when you're 7 years old that your parents were once children, but you imagine that they were children in this ancient historical landscape when nothing was the same. Suddenly I have this record of kids' theme tunes that would have been heard by the kids just a few years before me, you know, who weren't even a generation before me. And that felt really grown up and special and interesting, and it gave me these, like, sort of the feeling that people get when they imagine, like, BBC nostalgia suddenly came crashing onto me while I was listening to this record. And the opening track, because it had things I didn't know. It had things like Swap Shop and Saturday Superstore, which were like the forerunners to the Saturday morning magazine program that was on at the time, which of course was very important to any child, Saturday morning kids TV, and things like that. And the opening track was Doctor Who, and it was, I believe the name is Peter Howell's Doctor Who, the nice meaty synthesized one, with the backwards guitar sounding that bit. And anyway, the interesting flourish that I promised you when I said I was going to tell you this is as follows. Here it is! I've got it right here. Because in just the last few years, I managed to track it down on eBay. And so there it is. And so here is a lovely illustration that I guess gave, even though, I don't know, maybe I knew already, but that was my introduction, that picture, to the idea that the Doctor was many people. And at the time of creation of this record, none of those people were Sylvester McCoy. Or even Colin Baker, actually. Yes, no, he's not on there either. So there you go. So that was, I guess that was my memory of finding out that Doctor Who was a historical thing that went back far beyond me.
Yeah, I guess that would be the Peter Davison version of the theme song, which is, it actually started with Logopolis, or like the last season of Tom Baker. On that theme song, and the intro changed, and that's the intro that is more associated with Peter Davison than Tom Baker.
It's because Tom Baker had more or less the original one, didn't he, Tom?
A variant of it, but they're all variants of it.
Yeah.
But have you all seen the telly movie? I think it was called An Adventure in Space and Time.
Mm-hmm.
That was the telling of how it all began. Written by Mark Gatiss, who is one of the writers for Doctor Who.
I've seen that 3 times. I saw it the day it was on, and then I've had little screenings for different friends who missed it.
Yeah, I thought it was, but the Game of Thrones guy. If you watch Game of Thrones, it's kind of hard. Anyway, a different friend of mine, a mutual friend of mine, and Maddie suggested. Wouldn't it be great if now that they've got the actor, because he looks the part and he plays the part, they've got the sets, do retroactive series, do a whole new series of the first Doctor with the new actors.
That would be amazing. Or, I mean, at the very least, I feel as if they've, by making that film, they've made us accept him as the first Doctor, so they could bring the first Doctor into New Who.
Oh, they could, like that. You mean if they did like a multi-Doctor story arc?
Yeah, if they just had him come back for some reason. Yeah, we'd all know it wasn't, obviously, I can't remember his name. What was his name in the first one?
William Hartnell.
We know it wasn't William Hartnell, but we'd been set up enough that we would accept him as the character. That'd be fantastic. I'd love that.
Yeah, I like the idea of retroactive episodes. You could call it like Forgotten Adventures or something.
Or they could refilm the episodes they haven't got. Lost episodes. Have you talked about the lost episodes yet? Because that's a great topic.
Oh, let's talk about them right now. I actually have the DVD of the stories that have the missing episodes. So all the episodes.
Oh,
are
they
there.
did all of those, did they?
Yeah, it's called, I think, Lost in Time. I think it's Doctors 1 and 2, and it's like, for example, one is called, I think, The Wheel in Space or The Wheel in Time. That's got like 2 episodes missing, but the episodes that aren't there are sort of. I think it's hosted by Colin Baker, and he just tells you what happens in the meantime.
Oh.
And one story very recently got rediscovered.
Yes. 2, I think.
Oh, 2.
Oh, maybe not. Maybe it was 2 episodes, 1 story. I don't know.
It was, and that was the one where I think that's the new one where Patrick Troughton played the bad guy as well as the Doctor, because that's the most recently re-released one.
Oh yes, that's right. And there's this whole thing like, wow, he looks just like you.
Yeah. Apparently that's set in Australia.
Oh.
Up until that point, I had no idea that the Doctor had ever been to Australia.
So to properly introduce the concept to anyone watching who doesn't know what we're on about, you probably do, but here it is anyway. Back in the olden days, nobody knew that there would be such things as a television program that anybody wanted to see again in the future.
It's all just
because
pull and throw away.
Yeah, well, back in those days, TV was kind of still seen as like radio with pictures, and you know, radio came and went, and nobody ever asked to hear the news again. Nobody ever asked to hear episodes of obscure things again, and so Doctor Who comes on, they play it, perfect. Everybody liked that episode, great, burn it, and they would destroy the masters. Now, it wasn't quite as simple as that. They didn't destroy them after airing, but essentially they ran out of storage space, and they went, well, let's get rid of all of this so that we can, you know, use it again. And sorry, Ian?
I just coughed. But now that they have the attention, they were A-listed and B-listed. A-list, anything in the BBC that was A-listed was not to be touched. Doctor Who was B-listed, so destroy it if you have to, but keep it if you can.
Yeah. What was A-listed?
What I read didn't mention what was A-listed.
Well,
you
didn't talk about things like the coronation.
That's exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
You know, political events, sporting. I don't think they would have put a lot of importance on sitcoms, but maybe movies with historical facts, who knows?
Maybe.
I've often considered that question.
But
so, do you know, the interesting thing is there's only one other thing that I've ever heard of that anyone is sad about having been destroyed. There's Doctor Who, and then there's one other thing. Do you know what it is?
Well, Blake 7 is my guess, but I don't think that was destroyed.
No, newer than that. It may have happened to Blake 7 and people may be upset about it, but I haven't heard about it if it is. No, it's a lot newer than that. It's within my lifetime.
Red Dwarf?
No. I'll tell you.
Please do.
I'll tell you with a second flourish down here in my collection. Fraggle Rock. Fraggle Rock has not been destroyed, you'll be happy to hear, unless you live in the UK. Because Fraggle Rock was very deliberately a joint production between different regions, and different areas had their own version of Fraggle Rock. And at least the American and UK versions were made concurrently by the same people and both canon. They're both considered the main one. But one was shown here and one was shown in America, and obviously the American one, being the majority vote, gets kept. Our version, which was set in a lighthouse with a different actor, different ongoing storyline, same dog, and same Fraggle sequences, was destroyed. And so the trouble is that Fraggle Rock is not really something that UK people can now get nostalgic about. I think maybe 3 episodes of it, maybe 6 episodes of it survive today. And that's that. And that's a real shame, because the chap who played the old man in the lighthouse, whose name I confess I can't remember, died during the show, and they made it part of the show. They made it. There was this very special, Mr. Hooper style episode of Fraggle Rock in which the old man was replaced by his young nephew or something like that. Someone came in, and I believe that it was kind of used in the story that he was gone. And then this all culminated in the Fraggles actually eventually coming to see the new guy, I think, on his deathbed or something like that. They all came out and introduced themselves. So I'd love to see that again, and I won't. And just while we're on old BBC or old British TV and memories of Doctor Who, there's one more thing I need to drop in there, which is the concept of regeneration. We've all got a moment, haven't we, where we first twigged to what regeneration is and how interesting an idea that is. And I'd like to hear what yours were. Mine was a weird one, though, because mine wasn't Doctor Who. I know I said that I remember Sylvester McCoy's regeneration, but I just sort of remember the fact of it. And I remember being interested, but it didn't hit me in any big way. But then there was a terrible program. Probably terrible. Maybe I'm not giving it its fair dues there, but there was a program anyway, which was called Mike and Angelo. And Mike and Angelo was a weekly sitcom that was on either BBC or ITV. I can't remember which. I think it was ITV, which is to say channels 1 or 3 out of 4 that we had. They both had children's programming on them. And one of them had this Mike and Angelo. And it was a sitcom in which it was based... What was that, sorry?
It was on CITV.
Right, okay. Well, this was basically when you got home from school, you had 2 channels to choose from running kids' programming. And Mike and Angelo, think Mork and Mindy, but for kids, and not very good. And the idea was that this alien had arrived in this boy Mike's wardrobe one day, and he was essentially, the way that in which he was an alien was that he was basically just a silly man who didn't understand Earth customs and could go upside down and sit on the ceiling. That was his whole shtick. And other than that, it was just a sitcom about the various scrapes that the family get into. Well, one day, after about a year of this, when the series was in sort of full swing and fully established, Angelo, the alien, started to die. And he was just really, really, really ill, and they laid him down on this sofa. And then it was the end for him, and there was this great bright light, and he floated up into the air, and he spun around, and there was this strange thing on the screen, and then he came down as a different actor. And of course, this was a complete, just a rip-off, I realise now, of course, of the Doctor's regeneration. But at the time, having kind of left that behind me and, being more capable of forming solid memories and things, it hit me like a ton of bricks, this idea of just someone not just being recast, not just changing actor, but it's the story that the actor changes. It hit me in a visceral way, and it stuck with me forever. And so now, that's what I'm thinking of whenever I see a regeneration in Doctor Who. I'm watching it kind of with that in mind and feeling the impact of that. And what's frustrating is that as soon as maybe a year later, even children my age had forgotten that there was ever a different Angelo, and he ended up being in the series for another sort of 13 years or something like that. So the idea that he ever changed kind of disappeared and got brushed away. But I remember it.
Right. As I said early on with my earliest memories, because I grew up with 3, 4, and 5, because my dad's a huge TV watcher and Doctor Who's one of his favourite programs. There was no first moment for regeneration for me. I understood regeneration, so when I saw the episode of John Pertwee regenerating, I knew that Tom Baker was to come next.
Yeah.
And as I said, so for me, the exciting moment was when Peter Davison regenerated to Colin Baker, because I knew it was new. It was like, I haven't seen this before. That was right. It was exciting for me to see a new actor play the part that I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah.
But also because of having grown up with 3, 4, and 5 and just accepting that it's different people, even now I'm just like Peter Capaldi, he's still the Doctor. He's just a new actor portraying the same character, and I watch the show for the Doctor, not for the actor, like many
It's weird,
fangirls.
isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting how you do accept that it's the same person? And sometimes there was, and I saw someone tweet this, but I felt it as well when they did that episode last year that had Matt Smith and David Tennant together. There was this moment where a lot of us went, "So how have they done this? Is it split screen or what?" And then you're like, "Oh no, it is actually different men," because you kind of internalize that it's the same guy.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I used to hire it out from the video store all the time, the 5 Doctors. Which is really only the 4 Doctors because Tom Baker didn't want to do it, and apparently regretted it ever since.
Oh.
Which is why he did do the bonus scene at the end of the 50th anniversary, sort of to make up for it. Apparently, he did write a full script for the however many Doctors there were for the 30th anniversary, but it never saw the light of day.
Oh, wow.
Weird.
There is a fan animated series of it on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
All things done. But it was whichever actors were alive at the point, so it would have been 4, 5, 6, and 7. So it would have been the 4 Doctors. So
You know, I remember when John Pertwee died. I remember that very keenly, because I knew him from all sorts. You know, he was Wurzel Gummidge, and he was Spotty in Super Ted, and there was all sorts of reasons for me to know him. Chief among them, if I may just reach down to my... Can you tell that I recently went in the attic and got my childhood records down? Can you tell that?
Yes.
Children's Favourites, as sung by John Pertwee. He gives here an absolutely seminal Grandfather's Clock and Runaway Train on this record, both of which I've heard in so many different situations. You know, they would pop up all over the place when I was a kid, but this is the record they're from. And they're on YouTube, so if anyone's interested, look up John Pertwee, Grandfather's Clock, or John Pertwee, Runaway Train. They've got that same picture of the lion hand puppet on the YouTube videos. Well worth a listen. They're genuinely good. And I remember that just before he died, there was a thing on... I've already established what CITV was. CITV, I think, was going through its 20th anniversary at the time, and they had this sort of afternoon long block of programs to celebrate that. And in that, they had John Pertwee on for an interview in full Wurzel Gummidge costume and in character. And I've got that on video somewhere, and when I can digitize videos, I'll digitize that because it's, you know, it's worth having a look at. But that might be the last time he was on TV. It very well might be, because days later he died. So that was that.
Mm-hmm. And when a Doctor dies, in the TV show at least, they regenerate. And the most recent regeneration has been into Peter Capaldi. So what do you guys think of what you've seen so far of Peter Capaldi? And that is basically the first episode. Although I find you can't really judge a Doctor on the first episode, because the first episode is usually that body getting used to itself.
That's true. And when David Tennant regenerated, I still think that that his first episode as the Doctor was his best episode as the Doctor, because there's just something about David Tennant as the Doctor in that Christmas special that's just magical, which the scripts never quite lived up to again.
Oh, I disagree, because David Tennant was barely in that episode. He was like in the last.
I know.
half.
It was that's right. Yeah, it was a concentrated 5 minutes at the end.
Yeah, the best episodes are the ones where the Doctor doesn't show up.
Well, not episode then. Last 5 minutes, let's say. It was the best last 5 minutes.
Right. Because Matt Smith was in the story. That was his last regeneration, as any Doctor Who fan will know. A Time Lord can regenerate 12 times, giving them 13 bodies, but there is technology, Time Lord technology outside of that, which can renew the cycle. And Gallifrey's locked away in a painting somewhere, but somehow through the crack in the universe, they managed to get through and send him through a new batch of regenerations. So this is technically the first Doctor in a new set, in a new cycle of 12 generations.
Yeah.
When
And
you look at it
I-
like that.
That
I
bothered us
got
all so
two-
much for years.
Maddie, speak.
I got two very different. I found the episode today very. There's two very clear sections of the episode, and
Mhm.
now that we're having this conversation and reflecting on my first realization of what the regeneration was, I'm actually now a tad disappointed. But I thoroughly enjoyed the episode. So here's why. My original realizing of the concept of regeneration was from the books when Peter Davidson first arrived, which is Castrovolva. And it goes wrong, and he's an absolute mess, and they have to build that box out of the bits of the TARDIS, and the three companions drag him around, and Castrovolva's actually fake, and it's all a trap set up by the Master, and the whole time the Doctor's just a writhing, lunatic. I think half the time he's completely incapacitated inside the box. And reading that in a novel where they actually get the chance to give you more of the mind of the character, and you can see the personal struggle they're going through a little bit more clear than you can in film. That's when I realized the gravity of what a regeneration was, and it's a big deal. It's not just, oh look, I've got different eyebrows, and which was the theme of today's, and all this kind of stuff. But it's the mental process of, where am I? Who am I? Who are these people? What's happening? What just happened? What's going to happen? Why is it happening? Did I do it? Who did they? Did they do it? Blah 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 blah. So, in that sense, which for me has always been the most fascinating part, fish sticks and custard, that's, that kind of thing, that was missing today. Because what I got out of today's episode was a very clear distinction in the first 45 minutes first 40 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing was an exercise in part berating, part commenting on the audience's preconceived notions of going back to an elderly Doctor. All of the plot devices and the interactions between the characters, the dialogue interactions, were actually comments from the writers towards the fans. And the line I really enjoyed was when Lizard Lady, I forgot her name now, she berates Clara.
Mm-hmm. The veil.
For being
That scene.
disrespectful to the Doctor, because the Doctor trusted her enough to no longer present himself in a comforting format, in a format that makes him more agreeable. And then I think from then on the story shifts, and then the second part of the story is this whole idea of, you've remade yourself so many times, it was this whole parallel that I'm the android full of human guts and brains, and you're the Time Lord with a different face and bushy eyebrows.
It
And that
was
was
this
fantastic.
This episode was very much about faces. The theme of the episode was
Yeah, it really
changing
was.
faces.
Yeah, exactly. And that was
This is something I love about New Who, is that they really, even not as much as that novelization, which it sounds really cool, and I'd love to read that, and I probably can, because I've got a friend who's got them all. But they do delve into regeneration in different ways each time, and I always go, that's it now, there's no more ways you can do you can explore regeneration on television, and I'm always wrong. And this time, for them to do it in and this time, they, as you say, they did it in a thematic way, that the whole theme of the episode was about people rebuilding themselves, and that's clever. And so that's one way of doing it. And then let's try and think, how did they do it before? I can't remember how they went into it with Matt Smith.
Matt Smith was the food. Fish sticks and custard. There was that whole one block of scene where he was trying new food. It's like, I need an apple. I need yogurt.
Childish curiosity.
Yeah. Yes, and that was pretty much how they dealt with the regeneration, and that was it. Just that one block.
Yeah.
That one scene that was a what's the word? It was a montage. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what they did, that as you were saying, that seems flimsy to me. And I remembered it being more than that, but I know what I'm thinking of now. It's the fact that they did it beforehand with him. David Tennant left in a long, drawn-out way, which some people liked, some people hated, but whatever it was dramatic, and they used his departure to explore regeneration, and they had, didn't they, that quiet moment in the cafe or wherever it was where he was saying, like, I die and another man walks away in my clothes. And so he was maybe the first Doctor to really not want to regenerate, like, who saw it as a death.
I don't want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, great line.
I mean, at the time, I thought it was a bit much. But now that we have Adventure in Space and Time, it's like, great.
Oh, that scene was brilliant where the actor was in the mirror in his house crying in the bathroom and he actually said, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
Yeah, it was so good. And that tied into David Tennant to me, and now I like that bit more than I did before. So I should watch it again, really. I haven't seen it since.
Yeah, this conversation has given me a whole different perspective on regenerations.
Well, what I thought now that we're having this conversation, what I realized at the time, and I had processed intellectually, but I hadn't, I guess, let it evolve emotionally, was the idea of Peter Capaldi. Is it Capaldi? Capaldi?
Yeah.
Anyway, Peter. Good old Pete. And his incarnation of the Doctor, and maybe saying that I'm disappointed is a little bit aggressive this early on in the game, but I don't feel that I saw Peter's Doctor until that very, very final scene and those very, very final few lines after the phone call. That tiny moment, which was probably less than a minute, which was maybe 30 seconds and 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, and it wasn't the words, it wasn't the gesture, because we'd already seen the gesture and the coat puffed out, and I missed the catch call. Apparently he's got a new catch call. I didn't get that.
That might come in. Well, it'll be more obvious as the episodes go by.
It goes on. But anyway, it was almost like now that I think about it and I process it a bit more, it was almost like they'd addressed the fans in the first half. They'd done their theme of regeneration and rebuilding yourself so often to the point that there isn't an original you left. They'd dealt with the fact that the attractive young companion is going to continue with the storyline, and then it was like, okay, now we can move on and present a new persona to you, a new personality. But it was so small. But to Capaldi's credit, those few facial expressions, those few lines, now that I let it process, hit me pretty hard. I really did feel like I was watching a fully realized character, but it was just that. It wasn't a build-up of the whole episode, because the first half he's just a lunatic, typical confused regeneration style. The second part, he's aggressive, I've got a job to do, I must solve this, there's a bigger moral to this actor, getting a me to his role, and that little part at the end where he was able to say, here's my character, here's my personification of this script, and I thought it was fantastic and so brief but so impacting. So I'm super excited for this version of the Doctor, and I'm going to shut up now.
And now that the next episode is the Daleks. And I think that's when the Doctor Who
Daleks in space with space trooper dudes, and it was just like, here's Victorian London now, scoff out of space, woo! Great, love it.
And I think this second episode will really show Capaldi as, the Doctor. Because it's the Daleks. But if we want to get into some fan theories, that looks like the ship that Matt Smith found when the Daleks called him to go into the Dalek prison planet that Clara was a Dalek on. Eggs. She needed eggs to make a souffle. I'm just piecing things together in my head. I could be completely wrong.
Could be right.
Yeah, and oh damn it! Oh, you may have remembered when Capaldi was first cast. They're like, but he's been in it already.
Yeah,
and he was in David Tennant's era. He was in Pompeii. That episode there, and he was talking. Where do I get this face from? How does it come up? I don't make these decisions. The writer Stephen Moffat to address the fans saying, "Hang on, that's happened before," because it happened in Colin Baker. Colin Baker was in a Peter Davison story. So Moffat has come up with an idea and actually discussed it with Russell T Davies. This is what I think happens. They both had their own ideas about what happens, and apparently both ideas are very compatible with one another. So they've put them both through ideas. So that's something that will be explored late as the series goes on.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know they were going to address it again. I know they mentioned it this time.
Yeah, they're actually going to strictly address it. This is how and why it happens.
Oh, cool.
I have a theory. Like, I personally enjoy these story arcs, the seasonal story arcs. I think that's a great idea. The Impossible Girl in the newspaper ad and the Promised Land at the end, I think it's the Daleks.
Mary fucking Poppins.
Mary Poppins.
Mary
what?
Poppins swinging her umbrella around over her head. It was like,
oh, the end. The Promised Land.
Is it not British enough? Is Doctor Who not British enough that they have to take another classically derived British archetype and go, plonk, here you go. You haven't seen enough of this before.
But she said some interesting things that I think are gonna. She referred to the Doctor as my boyfriend.
Yes.
So I'm curious where that's gonna go.
Now, I don't know enough about Doctor Who, like old Who stuff, but I do know that there are names that people bandy about as things they'd like to see come in. And is that the sort of thing that, for instance, Arani might say? Is that the sort of thing that a female master might say? There are all sorts of things that she could have been.
It's true. Well, Rani herself is a Time Lord, so they don't need to get the same actor, do they?
Nope.
So we'll see. Maybe she's the master. Who knows? So that'll be something interesting to look forward to in
Matty,
future episodes.
When you said there was a catch call, do you mean the equivalent of Bad Wolf, one of those?
No, you had
Alonzi
and Geronimo and such has become
Oh,
a bit of a
well, the reason I ask is that there was one of you might remember this. When I was watching it last night, someone did say something, and I went, "That's the Bad Wolf of this series, isn't it?" Something happened and was just moved on from.
You mean like in a split second, it was brushed over
It was a bit more explicit. It was right on camera. It was presented as a thing that was happening, but then they didn't deal with it, and so it made me think, oh, that's coming back, and that's going to be the ongoing thing. But I can't remember what it was.
I don't remember details, but I remember having a similar feeling, a similar mind pop, where I had exactly the same thing. But I'll then have to rewatch it again.
Yeah,
that's
going to happen.
Yeah.
It's actually on in Australia at 7:40 p.m. tonight on the ABC.
And streaming all day on the ABC website. So.
Yes. So very, very easy to watch again.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. I saw a poster for this season. It was the inside of the TARDIS, Capaldi there, and at the top of the TARDIS you could sort of see the bottom of what I'm assuming was Gallifrey, and it had the date, and it said "The Search Begins."
Yes.
Supposed to be the premise of the series. He goes searching for it, or is that something else?
No, I think the premise of the series he goes. And I got the impression from the previews that we've had that the Daleks will be the overall arcing story, and Davros, because I think the Daleks will be looking for Gallifrey just as much as the Doctor will, which makes sense.
My parents had a Staffordshire Bull Terrier called Davros.
Oh. Did it have a wheelchair?
No, but if you've ever seen a purebred Staffordshire Bull Terrier, because it was part of a breeding pair, and if you imagine plonking one of those in a trash can, you just throw a few lights on and shoot your own episode, no make it required.
Yeah, so anyway, that's my that's my theory, that because it would make sense that the Daleks would be looking for Gallifrey. They would have heard it on the grapevine that it's out there somewhere.
For one,
yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to go away and call back because I've got such a bad delay right now that it's not useful, so hold on a sec.
Okay. I was just going to...
I'm going to take this opportunity to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Play some waiting music. The piano's behind you there, Ian.
I'll just hum it. Dun 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 dun. Can you even hear this piano if I play it? I think this microphone's almost too good. I'll play it.
I can hear it.
Very good.
No worries. As I was just going to say, the Daleks always know who the Doctor is. Like Matt Smith even addressed it in that episode where the Daleks were pretending not to know. Like, you know who I am. You always know. Which makes me think the Daleks can see like the energy signature of the Time Lord. They don't necessarily just look at the face. They can actually see his, and they recognize it. They can put it. They have like a database for him. It's like,
well,
okay,
they put that into context, don't they? With the Sontaran chap who keeps calling Clara boy and things like this, and not recognizing, the subtleties of humans. And that works in this case, doesn't it? They're not seeing the silly old details like whether or not it's Peter Capaldi. They just see that it's the Doctor.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, I was what I was saying, and I was so rudely interrupting you because of the delay, is that I, for one, welcome the Daleks in the series. There's among Doctor Who fans, there's very much a kind of like, we're sick of Daleks, we don't want to see them anymore. And I understand that because they're in it quite a lot, but I think, honestly, that's rather more to do with the fact that we're all older now. To the kids, that they haven't seen Daleks since they were born. Because it's been ages since Daleks were in it. No matter what it might feel like to us, it's been years. And so for the kids to whom, David Tennant is as, I don't know, Pertwee was to me or something, to them, he's ancient history and before their time. I think we owe them a few Daleks, because you do need to think of the Daleks as main Doctor Who villains if you're going to be a kid watching Doctor Who, I think.
I would like to see more Cybermen, personally, and a more focus, rather than just a Cyberman, a double Cyberman episode once every 3 seasons. I'd like to see like Cybermen really do their thing.
There's a dangling issue with Cybermen, isn't there? Which I feel like they may have cleared up in their last appearance, which is the fact that in New Who, it's always been not the Cybermen, but this other set of Cybermen with a different origin story. And I feel like there's something to be done there to really bring in, almost, have them encounter the first Cybermen again and have a story with them, because it's so interesting that the new kids kind of deserve to have that.
Well, I think the Cybermen's a very brief appearance in one of the later Matt Smith stories. Because if you look at the chest, they didn't have the C for Cyberdyne Industries. So I think they were meant to be, and they had the rounder heads. I think they were meant to be, this universe's Cybermen. So we just
I think they were.
And they sounded more like
a
classic Cybermen.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I meant when I said that they might have cleared it up, but I just don't remember the details. But let's have a proper, the original universe Cybermen story in New Who. Let's have it, because Capaldi would be great with that sort of stuff. He's very clear that Peter Capaldi is going to bring this ability to be serious, and he's not going to be serious all the time because he's a brilliant comic actor as well. But he is a devastating actor. He's a very good, and he can do the serious stuff, and so we could have that. By the way, are you three familiar with Peter Capaldi?
I'm only familiar with him from Doctor Who, and he's been in the Who universe twice.
Yeah.
And the other one being Torchwood, Children of Earth.
He managed to make Torchwood watchable. Yes, he's very good.
Yes. Other than that, I really have no idea who Peter Capaldi is.
Okay. Maddie and Zach, what about you guys?
Well, I'm the same with Ian.
Uh-huh.
I have to double check something, because when I saw him, he did look Yeah, that's who he was.
Yeah.
You ever seen World War Z?
Ah,
Oh, who
Not
was in that?
He
I have
played
seen
one
it.
of the
He pla-
World Health Organization doctors.
Oh,
he
towards the end of the
played
film?
a Who doctor in World War Z.
Yeah, he played.
Oh.
He literally played. Yeah, he was a doctor working for Who. So and so he was actually one of the few decent characters in it.
Okay, well then
'Cause-
let me contextualize for you, because this is not like with many previous Doctors where the world is introduced to this, well, the world, but the UK is introduced to this actor with Doctor. Peter Capaldi is extremely famous here. He is a very well-known actor, mainly for The Thick of It. If you've ever heard of a political comedy called Veep, it is essentially to The Thick of It as The American Office is to The Office.
I actually have heard about in the thick of it. I actually have seen like a couple of clips that people like because I have a couple of friends who are diehard Doctor Who fans,
Yeah.
and they're just like and they were posting this all over their Facebook pages about Peter Capaldi, and I think it was like a collection of clips, and it was just a video called "The New Doctor Can Swear." And it was
Yes.
just a collection of his clips swearing in the show. And it was one of the funniest things I'd seen all day because I was just like, oh, that's different.
Yeah, it's that. Yes, Peter Capaldi. He's been around for a long time. He's been an actor most of his life, but he really became famous with this show, The Thick of It. And good God, if you take away anything from this episode, please go and watch The Thick of It whenever you possibly can. It might be easier for you to watch the movie spin-off, which was called In the Loop, and that was not exactly an extended episode. It had many of the same characters in it, but wasn't quite the same. But you can think of it as the Thick of It movie. The Thick of It is a just ridiculously well written and well performed and hilariously funny sort of version of essentially like The West Wing if it was British. That's kind of what it is. You've got like the people who, I mean, not quite, because they're not working around the Prime Minister, but you're in a political party sort of HQ, and you are just seeing them do all the frantic running around that they have to do to get anything done, and you're watching how any political maneuvering always goes wrong or is seen differently by the public or whatever. And it's just made by and starring so many people who are worth paying attention to. And the whole thing is orchestrated by Amanda Iannucci, who is the guy who, along with Chris, oh God, I can't remember. Chris, the brilliant comedy man, Chris, invented things like Alan Partridge, and they did The Day Today, and they did, I think he was involved in Brass Eye, I'm not sure, but Amanda Iannucci is a very good British comedy creator, and it's kind of the first thing that I'm aware of him doing that was played straight. It's not played as a comedy. It's played straight, but it's so funny. And Malcolm Tucker is kind of the spin doctor character who, Peter Capaldi, who comes along, and he swears all the time, but and that's what people take away, is that he's very foul-mouthed. But it's not just that. His every line is poetry. It's extremely vulgar, but in new ways that nobody ever thought of before that series. Just everything that comes out of his mouth is worth listening to, and you will be able to find much of it on YouTube. So yeah, for a taste of how good The Thick of It is, just type in Malcolm Tucker onto YouTube, and you will see Peter Capaldi at possibly his best. So when they had this big announcement show of who was going to be the next Doctor, we were all joking with each other that it was going to be Peter Capaldi. The rumor had come out, but we didn't believe it because it was too good to be true. And I mean that. It was the best case scenario dream Doctor that won't possibly happen. And so that was the rumor, but then there were the more realistic rumors of who it was going to be, people that nobody really wanted to see as the Doctor or cared about or whatever, the usual stuff, because it's usually that. I remember that was what it was with David Tennant. It was like, no, not him, and then of course he was brilliant.
Right.
I don't know why anyone said, oh, not him. I think he'd just been in something before that some people didn't like or something. I don't know. But then
Harry Potter.
I remember, yeah. But then when she opened, Zoe Ball did this big breath, and she said, "Okay, the new Doctor is," long pause, "Peter Capaldi," and we heard it and didn't believe it, and we saw him on the stage and didn't believe it. And I think up until like this week, I've been operating under the assumption that it's still too good to be true, so he'll be the Doctor for one episode and then regenerate, or something like that, because it was too good. And now it's real. So I'm telling you, you're in good hands. I mean, remember those comedy lines in the robot restaurant, which in the hands of even almost any other Doctor would be delivered in that snippy, clippy way that kids apparently like, that Doctor Who talks in all the time. But in this, it was done that way, but also it was really funny because Peter Capaldi's just really good.
Speaking of David Tennant, I never got what was... Everyone loved him and thought he was the best, but I thought Christopher Eccleston actually gave a stronger, more mature performance.
Many people thought that. Many people thought that.
But is that the very key word there, a mature performance? Because I think what the first half of today's episode was all about was stop being immature about Doctor Who. Doctor Who is not the OC with spaceships. Doctor Who is a slightly serious show that deals with big issues with this little sly wink to the world, a little bit of irony here and there. But people were starting to make it into something that it wasn't. And honestly, most of the Doctor Who fans that I encounter go, David Tennant, Matt Smith, oh, there's more? I mean, they don't, as much as Eccleston was the reboot, the initial reboot, most people have just gone, nah, grumpy old sod with a big nose, perving on a young chick, we'll just move on from that and pretend that never happened. Because the David Tennant was, well, David Tennant was a similar age, but he's better looking and he didn't have a funny nose.
David Tennant was what Doctor Who needed, essentially, to take off in America.
Yes.
And I think to an extent, I think he was because when Christopher Eccleston was cast, it wasn't an unusual choice, and I remember us going, well, how's that going to work? And it took until I watched the first episode to go, oh, he's actually being the Doctor, cool. Because we thought it was going to be a kind of like grim and gritty version of the Doctor, sort of a gritty reboot.
I'm Batman, not the Doctor.
Yeah, kind of. But I think David Tennant, basically, Christopher Eccleston was good. He was very good. But David Tennant fitted in with what the current generation was into. I think that's what it is. And I think that is... We write that off too much, I think, by saying it was because he was good looking. Because he was, but he was also... He was a very good actor as well. And when he was allowed to do that, he was great. And I think that the first... As I say, that the 5 minutes at the end of his first episode, I never quite thought it got as good as that again. I thought he was very good in that. And then, of course, there was the two-parter where he was the human school teacher and things like that. So he had his moments to shine. But at the same time, that was when the excesses of the show started to kick in. So it was tricky to see sometimes.
Right. Can I going back to Christopher Eccleston? There was like a sideshow. What was that called? Like the making of the. They
Confidential.
That's it. Who Confidential. When you watched Christopher Eccleston's interviews in Who Confidential, you could sort of see that as the series went on, he didn't want to play it anymore. It's like, no, I'm fed up with this. I don't want to do it. His credit, that did not show in his acting. He was the Doctor to the very last scene. However, when you watch Tom Baker in his very last story, Logopolis, you sort of see he's fed up with just being the Doctor. It's like, more Doctor Who. I never should have re-signed the contract. Just sort of comes through in his acting,
Oh, okay.
which I think is poor effort, really. Was when
Well,
yeah.
it was interesting. Sorry, it was interesting with Christopher Eccleston because for the longest time he left, and like fans were angry about that, weren't they? There was this, oh, he's too big for this, is he? Oh, he doesn't want to be. And of course, there was the story where he didn't want to be typecast. But then about sometime last year, the real story came out. Do you remember that? It was we found out what actually was going on, and it was that he kind of left under protest because of the way that the show treated its younger, less important actors. Because it was
Actors or viewers?
actors. Because it was when... Now, some of this will be wrong, so go and look at it yourselves, anyone watching this, because I don't want to put words into anyone's mouths. But it was something along the lines of, it was a new show, and nobody knew that it was going to be the success it was. They wanted it to be at least successful enough that it didn't destroy the name of Doctor Who forever again. But they were kind of a plucky band of new TV people trying to be seen and trying to make their mark. And what that meant necessarily was that everything had to be done by the seat of their pants. Everything had to be done quickly and cheaply. And what this translated to was that the key actors, Eccleston and Billie Piper, were rushed around and driven from one place to the other at breakneck speed. And meanwhile, the extras and the less important actors really were expected to put up with conditions that they shouldn't have been expected to. They were expected to care as much as everyone else and race around and break their necks to get the thing filmed in a way that Eccleston didn't feel was fair, because it turns out that Christopher Eccleston is an extremely generous actor who really cares about people and didn't see anyone involved in the show as being junior to him, as being less important than him. And he kind of resented the fact that the production seemed to feel that way. And so he was like, right, look, if you can't sort this out, I can't be a part of this anymore. And they couldn't sort it out, so he left. Now, as I understand it, now that it's got its feet and it can command a certain amount of, Doctor Who can tell the BBC what to do to an extent, that problem isn't there anymore. But essentially, the long and short of it is, I may have got the details wrong, but Christopher Eccleston left not because he was being a grouchy actor, but because he was being a lovely guy who is the way actors ought to be. And I wish I could remember where and in what context this came out. It was, I know, someone who was in an acting class filmed him coming to talk and do a lecture at their university or something like that, and that was where the story came out. And it was just this moment where the world realized, no, Christopher Eccleston isn't a grumpy old man. He's great.
Right, can I just... Zach, did you want to say something?
Because Eccleston was the first Doctor that I actually sat down and watched with The Empty Child and then the follow-up episode, The Doctor Dances. Yeah. But for me, Eccleston has always been one of those actors that, outside of Doctor Who, if I'll be watching watching a trailer for something online, it'll pop up it's some silly, like Thor 2, and they pop up the trailer, and I'm watching it's Thor 2, and then all of a sudden, and Christopher Eccleston as the leader of the Dark Elves, I just went like this. Damn it, Marvel! You got $8 out of my pocket.
Yeah. Well, the way to counter this is, and sadly this is going to be more difficult now because it's been removed from Netflix, but whenever you can, you should watch Cracker. Cracker is, I believe, what sort of launched Christopher Eccleston as an actor recognized in the UK. And let me just tell you what the series is, and you'll go, oh, I want to watch that. It's Robbie Coltrane, Hagrid, as in a serious role as a sort of a drunk Oh, no, I nearly said forensic. It's not that. He's like a psychological. He's a psychologist, I believe. It's been a while since I watched it, but he's a criminal psychologist. So he kind of gets, or at least in this he gets hired by the police to help with various cases, or well, not so much hired as like begrudgingly acknowledged to be the best guy to help them with these cases. Christopher Eccleston is essentially the chief of police equivalent character, and the two of them solve crimes, and it's a serious hard-boiled crime show starring the Doctor and Hagrid, both of them in top form, like acting masterclass. Really, really good show.
I'll have to definitely check that out, because this last thing to really say about Eccleston and Who was one of the episodes that I sought out to watch was episode 6 of the first of like the reboot series, which was Dalek. They go into that underground complex where they have the one Dalek.
Yeah.
Chained up in the room, and I just remember sitting there watching, like, okay, I'd seen bits and pieces of it online, like, okay, let's really watch this, and like, I'll never forget the moment where he steps forward and just goes, "I can help, I'm the Doctor," and the Dalek's reaction, just like, "The Doctor," and like that whole reaction, and then him running and screaming from it, and I was just like, I actually thought he was legitimately scared to be in the room with it. I was convinced of that.
Yeah.
And of course, just him talking to the Dalek was like, for me, was just made me want to continue watching the series, even continue on, just because the dialogue between them about the war, the hinting at the war and everything, and then when the Dalek finally turns to him and just says, "You would have made a great Dalek." And just that whole thing, I was just like, okay, I need to keep watching this, and then unfortunately it got away from me. But one other thing about Doctor Who is one thing I always knew, because I'd heard from friends and family that had seen it, the Daleks were like, oh, the Daleks, yeah, they're all really threatening until they get to a set of stairs. And I just remember getting to that part in the episode and just watching it all of a sudden start levitating up the stairs, and I'm just like, well... yeah.
It's a funny thing. The thing about Daleks and stairs is like that. It's so strange, because that was a joke that evidently someone made, or everyone collectively made in the 70s or 60s or something. This idea of like, well, just go upstairs and you're safe, and it became such a part of the public consciousness that they directly tackled it head on and made it a gag in that episode where they all go up the stairs and then it starts to fly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they've been flying for decades. They certainly did it in the 80s. I think they may have done it earlier than that. And so it's like the joke hasn't been true in donkey's years, but they really nailed it with that series. They were like, no, look, they can fly. Look, here's a whole battalion of them flying through space. They can fly, guys.
Yeah, and I do remember after...
Hang on, Maddie and Zach both talked at once. Zach, speak.
Okay, I do actually, after that, I did see a couple of clips from like the 80s where it showed the Daleks like floating through the air and just stuff. I'm just like, oh, okay. So they've always been able
to fly. Maddie, were you going to say something? Your microphone's off.
It was off. It's on now. I was going to reference the movie. The hideous movie that we all preferred didn't have anything to do with Doctor Who, which I can't remember the proper name of now.
Oh, with the he was a Peter as well.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Oh, the Star Wars guy.
No, Paul McGann. Paul McGann.
No.
The Star Wars him.
Fella. I can't even remember his name in Grand Moff Tarkin.
That's the
Peter
one.
Cushing. Peter
Yes.
Cushing.
Yes, thank you.
They all fly in that.
Yeah.
Do they?
Yes.
Because do you realise there's 2 Peter Cushing movies?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they all fly in both of them. Like, as in they hover slightly above the ground, and they explain it as being they have it's all magnets in the Earth's magnetic field, and that they use that to hover, and because it was the age of magnets, and we're all going to be magnet people in the future.
Okay.
And
the
one
second
of them
film was the better film.
Is that the one that's got good old Bernard Cribbins in it?
Possibly.
Not sure.
Yeah, but Bernard Cribbins, who was Wilf in the in one of the David Tennant series of New Who, was like the young man hero in one of the movies, I believe.
What's his name? Bernard Cribbin.
Bernard Cribbins.
Cribbins,
And
right.
by the way, New Who fans know him as Wilf, Donna's dad, I believe. Or is it dad or granddad or whatever he was? What?
Grandfather.
Grandfather.
I think.
But he again, he like Peter Capaldi is very famous in the UK. Just like and not like Peter Capaldi. I mean, he's like very famous. He was the voice of the Wombles. You must have seen those.
Wombles of Wimbledon, common are we.
Yes, and that was Cribbins, I think.
Making good use of the things that we find. Things that the everyday folk leave behind. And what I was saying before, what you were talking about, Christopher Eccleston leaving. I've been an extra here in Australia on Australian television and in a commercial. The Australian TV was great. It's just it's a bunch of Aussies making a TV show. And the extras the hero talent gets special treatment because they're the hero talent. But the extras don't get talked down to or anything. A lot of the actors actually went and asked those guys for their autograph. They're all quite happy to sign their autographs and have a chat. Some even came over and had a chat and got a smoke from the extras who were smoking. But when I did this Commonwealth Bank commercial, Commonwealth Bank is like the main bank in Australia, and they will fork out shitloads to have their ads be good. One ad was even directed by Michael Bay. He even starred in the ad that he directed.
Oh, I remember that just recently, yeah.
It was a few years ago here.
Well, maybe I'm thinking of something else then, because I'm thinking there was an advert recently where he's like, "I'm Michael Bay, so let me just press this button," and like an explosion goes off behind him. So I don't remember what it was an advert for.
Particular ad, it was like an action movie, but they were like Teenage Mutant Ninja Koalas, except they were warriors with the gun packs and massive explosions going over. Then it was like them all talking in a boardroom with the bank directors and Michael Bay sitting there. It was actually Michael Bay sitting there. And they're like, "Don't you think this is a bit much for a bank commercial?" And of course, the slogan for that bank is "Determined to be different." And when I was on a commercial, it was the director of Alien Resurrection and Amelie. That movie. It's a French movie.
Amelie. Yeah.
Yes, that's the movie. He was kind of a prick, not to be unprofessional or anything, but his attitude, and the actual assistant director, who was actually the assistant director for Packed to the Rafters, had apparently talked to him the day before, because he basically just bullied his actors. Talked down to them, "I'm the director, you're the actors." He said, "That's not going to fly here, that's not how we do things in Australia," and he basically set him straight, and it was apparently easier to deal with after that. But he, excuse me, I got the impression from him, just from his persona, that he thought very highly of himself. And he was just here doing, a lowly bank commercial. That kind of an attitude. But I don't see why the bank would fork out so much money for very few people would know who directed that ad. The average television viewer is not going to know or care. Why fork all that money to get a big name, like a super famous director, to do an ad that anyone could have directed?
I think it's the idea of the artistic talent that essentially everyone assumes the director is this great artistic talent, when actually the director gives, it's in his title, he gives directions.
Yes.
But he has a team of people that help him to make that great work. Like, to use an example, and people have actually said this, that Quentin Tarantino would not have been nearly as successful if he had not had the editor that he had working for him. Because he had this one editor that knew how to exactly cut his scenes at the right moment to make them perfect.
Right. It's the
Or-
same as anything.
or-
It's a collaborative effort. Film, TV. Probably the only thing that's not a collaborative effort is a book.
Danotopia is another beast for another day.
Oh. Okay.
So, speaking of beasts, totally off topic and the worst segue in the world.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh yeah.
the TARDIS. New redesign of the TARDIS. There
Yeah,
was a bookshelf. That was the segue. There's a bookshelf in the TARDIS now.
Yeah, because she said, "Oh, you've made a few changes." I didn't think his changes were that big from Matt Smith's previous TARDIS. Also, the
I thought that was
exterior of the exterior, he needs more round things.
Colors were different. The
Oh,
palette
really?
of the lines were completely different.
See,
Oh,
they've
okay,
got
so-
a problem, which is that Matt Smith's first TARDIS was such a adventure playground. It was such a Wonderland design. It was just beautiful, and it looked like a children's science museum or something like that.
Mhm.
And then it changed to a very drab, just it's blue now, kind of, quite basic interior. I think it was a Christmas special when it changed, and that was a disappointment because I don't know why they bothered with that. It didn't make a bold statement. It was just like, well, now it's like an interior. And then this one is apparently different, but no, I didn't notice the difference either. And I think it's because it's, again, dark blue and quite basic. And it's just because they, with the Eccleston TARDIS that was that sort of tree-looking design,
Yeah,
and then
steampunk, organic thing.
yeah, and then the Matt Smith version, which was, as I say, the crazy children's science park design. Those were so interesting that to now go back to what is essentially a classic Old Who style TARDIS update, it's difficult to tell between them. And I wonder what to do with that. Because, of course, for most of its life, the TARDIS has looked roughly the same or similar with the Old Who TARDISes were not a million miles apart. And in fact, you could say that they're just, if they changed at all, it was just because they rebuilt the set or whatever. So it's fine for it to look like that, but it's definitely not as interesting. And I feel like they should have waited until Peter Capaldi to make that change. It's a perfectly fine change to make, but to do it in the latter half of Matt Smith was a little bit odd and didn't seem to connect too much, I think.
Well, the new one, the Peter Capaldi one, I thought it's interesting going back to the steampunk thing that I would have referred to this new aesthetic as being more steampunk in that, maybe I need to rethink that, but
As you said earlier, Matty, the changes from the previous Matt Smith one that looks a lot like this one, it's rather than one large change, it's a lot of smaller, subtler changes. As you said, like the bookshelf, there's a couple of bookshelves here and there, and there's a few glowing lines on the banisters on the top tier of the TARDIS.
there's actually color contrasts, whereas in my opinion, traditionally the interior of the TARDIS was a wash of color. As in, the originals are very white, and it was very blown out, kind of overexposed white. The reboot, or what did you call it before, Ian? The
Revival
TARDISes were, the Eccleston one in my memory was quite grey, and everything was grey. There was no contrast. There was no opposite end of the colour wheel. And then there was blue, but this one had contrast. It had purple and orange, which are, actually contrasting colours. And what I thought was interesting was the little platform that he's sitting in at the end, which has his large leather recliner up with the bookshelf on an actual raised platform that overlooked the central console. So I don't know whether that's something that's going to play into it, but considering Capaldi's age, his dress sense, and the inclusion of a bookshelf and what is a study area in a room that, in my mind, echoes a cold stone building with a fireplace in the corner. You can see I've overthought this, haven't I? I'm wondering if
Very
the interactions. very Victorian, very stately, very gentleman's club. No, not gentleman's club, because that's a brothel. Like a club. Like I'm going back to like Phineas Fogg in Around the World in 80 Days. He's always at the club having his breakfast and reading the paper. And it's that environment. And I'm hoping that they make use of the levels of. I can just imagine, Oswald running around the bottom like a little child while Capaldi sits in his spinning leatherback armchair, dictating from afar with his wrinkled wisdom. But, so apparently I'm the only one impressed by the new TARDIS, so I'll just go sit in the corner and shut up then.
It could be a callback to the maturity, since they are basically establishing this is this mature Doctor, and then essentially perhaps the TARDIS is, because I haven't seen it yet, but basically perhaps the TARDIS is reflecting that return to maturity.
The entire first episode... Like I was saying before, the entire first half of the episode is an older, more mature person berating a childish person, i.e. the audience, into their incredibly shallow, two-dimensional perspective of the Doctor that has been developed over the last sort of 5 years of marketing. And it's a little bit of a like, okay, look, you've had your fun. It's a little bit deeper than this. We've got to get back to the important themes. Please watch the episode for the storylines and not just the actors. Okay, let's get on with it.
Right.
And the TARDIS, I thought, gave that impression.
Right. Then getting back to the novels, you'd think like Matt Smith and David, they'd be the brightly coloured covers and the paperback. Peter Capaldi gives more of a leather-bound, hardback, embossed cover with like gold imprint. That kind of very mature, the sort of thing you'd expect on a Victorian bookshelf.
And I hope he throws one at someone. That would be fantastic.
With
like, he grabs a book from the shelf and wipes her out with it.
Here's another thing that changes from one Doctor to the next. The intro. This is the most changed intro since the revival. What do you guys think of the new intro?
I'll tell you what I think of it. Because I did. Did anyone give a little cheer when his angry eyes whooshed towards the camera in the intro?
Those angry eyes from the 50th anniversary special.
Yeah, I was happy about that because I'm very much a fan of the Doctor's face appearing in the intro.
They didn't do that in the revival until Matt Smith's last season. That was the first time they did it.
Yeah.
But I've always been a fan for it, and I've been waiting ever since its revival. When are they going to put the face in?
Yeah. So it's always a delight when they do.
Yeah. This intro is so different and so far removed from previous ones.
Yes, and do you know why? Do you know the story behind it?
I do not.
There was around about last year sometime when we knew it was going to be Peter Capaldi. Someone on YouTube just made that intro basically. So as a fan thing, and they just made it and they put it up and they were like, "Wouldn't it be cool if here's my idea of what a Doctor Who intro might be like?" And he put it up, and Stephen Moffat just watched it and went, "Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, we agree. Come and make that for us." So he did.
Nice. Because I know the Matt Smith one. A lot of fans found that quite poorly and flat and two-dimensional to the point where I've seen a fan-made one that was better than the Matt Smith one. It was much more, the galaxies when flying through space was much more three-dimensional. It actually came at you rather than just like a flat picture coming at you. It was more like, the whole thing coming at you.
I've got to say, I can't remember what the Matt Smith one was like.
It was just space and then his face for a bit, and that was basically it. But this one's all cogs and wheels and a clock, and it's...
Yes, now I've seen people, I think, mistakenly say, "Oh, they've gone with a steampunk one." I think that's a word that's been bandied about too much. It's clocks, is what it is. It's time.
Yeah, exactly. But they were one with Roman numerals, not Arabic numerals. So again, it almost is starting to lean into that steampunk era. Steampunk is slowly becoming very, very popular.
It absolutely is, but that's what I mean. It's like steampunk isn't the only thing cogs are from, and I think that's the mistake
Oh.
that some people are making. This is
Yeah.
Right.
it fits in with a steampunk aesthetic. It certainly does, and they might be doing that deliberately. But the reason for it is because of clocks and time
Mhm.
travel.
This steampunk is almost getting to the point where a young child might just see a grandfather clock and think, "Oh wow, look at that steampunk clock,"
Yeah.
and think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
one where you can actually see the cogs behind the face and see them.
Mhm.
So do you think we've all had our say and we've been talking for long enough?
If I could just add one thing,
You certainly can.
because I haven't watched the show, I've actually seen a couple of fan productions, like spin-offs, and I'm going to send 2 images. They are from the official canon of the show that these spin-offs take place of.
Mhm.
But this, in 2011, as many people know watching this, Hasbro decided to redo their My Little Pony lineup
Yeah.
and re-release it. Well, when they did, there was an episode, and this character showed up in the background.
Can you do a screen share for our viewers?
Certainly.
If you can't, I'm happy to post these links on the eventual YouTube video for people to look at.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
Oh,
Zach,
no, here we go.
say something so we. Hang on.
This character showed up in the background.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people immediately flocked to YouTube and basically said, "It's David. It's the Doctor." And
Mhm.
everyone and a lot of people were going like, "No, you're crazy." In season 4, this showed up in the background for 3 seconds on screen. And this is actually this character is actually named Rose, and the fan canon of this character is the Doctor. That's what they call him, and so it's interesting because they've actually a couple of the writers of especially the comics and stuff.
Mhm.
They basically said, yes, we are fans of the show. We are fans of Doctor Who, and there are 2 fan productions people did, and I watched them because I was out of curiosity because I was in that phase of just rediscovering Doctor Who after I graduated from my undergrad at university, and someone actually did 2 fan productions. They're audio dramas of Doctor Who, but set in the My Little Pony reboot universe, and they're weird. I'm not gonna lie. They are weird as can be, mainly because they try to do some of the old Who tropes in this universe. They actually did. One of the productions actually did do a Cybermen episode. And because these characters are supposed to be the idea that the Doctor somehow wound up in this parallel universe, the Cybermen episode was half of the dialogue from the Doctor character was him laughing at the absurdity of cyber ponies. And so literally, he was just laughing the entire time, just like, no, you're Cybermen, right? He's like, yes, we are. And he's just like, but you're ponies. Yes. And he's just laughing the whole time because the concept is absurd to him. And conversely, in the pilot episode for the other series that's very popular, at least amongst YouTube, was they actually had the Weeping Angels. And so it was very interesting that was just another side of Who that I had seen, was that because of that one screenshot someone did, one background character that one animator thought, you know what, screw it, I like this show, I'm going to throw this in the background, that there are actually 2 complete spin-offs of Doctor Who set in this kitschy girls cartoon show. Except, I think actually the one guy, he released a teaser, because he also does a audio drama about a girl and her imaginary friend. and the adventures they have. He released a teaser that was basically, I think he's going to do one of his like his big episode that he keeps trying to do, but his computer keeps catching fire on him. Is actually an introduction to a future timeline where one of the characters actually, because of their adventures with him, creates Daleks.
Well, it makes sense that things like that would eventually, that fans would cross those things over, doesn't it? Because Doctor Who has, particularly in the Matt Smith era, has really become a thing that, the Tumblr crowd is big into, right? Doctor Who, and and they're the ones who reacted with some concern about the inclusion of an old Doctor, and I think did make it quite a brave move for them to cast someone who is allegedly older than William Hartnell was by about 1 year. And that, it's just tremendously exciting. I can't wait to see what Capaldi's going to give us, because what he's given us so far in that one episode has run the gamut of all the different things I'd like to see. And let's hope that they keep it up.
And I definitely want to get caught up. My planning, unfortunately, master's degree student last year of my master's program, so right now I basically have the old bullwhip basically on the back of my neck every time I think about school. So I do plan on eventually getting caught up. A friend of mine did get caught up, and he's in the same program, but to be fair, I think he'd actually been watching it before because his father was a fan. And my other friend who got caught up, he doesn't do anything really right now, so he has basically all the free time in the world to get caught up.
Well, the trouble with getting caught up with New Who is that the episodes are 45 minutes long, and lots of them are boring. And so lots of them are not boring, but the ones that are boring, they're hard to get through. I tried to rewatch it all on Netflix recently, and I just got stuck on an early Tennant episode. I can't remember which one, where I do the one where they get the evil letters on their face. And it was just not. Yeah, it just wasn't interesting enough.
Yeah.
That, it became I've got to watch this every lunchtime or whatever, because I watched them at lunchtime. So I'd failed to get any further than that.
Well, I watched Lost when it was on.
Oh, I hated Lost.
I can take boring TV in strides.
And that's the thing about Doctor Who is that whenever there's an episode that's boring or that you don't like or whatever, there'll be one that you do like, because it's such a strange way of making TV that completely different creative teams will do this episode and that episode, and they fluctuate wildly in quality, but there's always going to be a good one coming.
What you could always do, Zach, is check out the fan favorites and just compile a list, so you're just getting through the key episodes, so you can keep up and just forget the ones that don't really add anything extra.
I did actually. It's one of only I actually bought 3 of the episodes online, and that was The Doctor Dances, the Empty Child, and then Utopia. The Tennant episode where they it was the Tennant episode where they actually went to the end of the universe.
Oh, yes, and they meet Yana.
And they meet Professor Yana, which everyone I had talked to at that point, you need to see this one just because. I'm like,
right.
Okay, why not? 45 minutes later. Yeah.
Before you watch the Peter Capaldi episode, you must watch the David Tennant episode, The Girl in the Fireplace.
Yes.
Okay.
It directly references that. And you know what, honestly, I would say the thing is, we're all excited about Peter Capaldi right now, but there's so much good stuff you haven't seen that you can be equivalently excited about, that I almost think that you should just keep watching it through, but just slowly. You don't have to be caught up.
Oh, I know.
You know?
That's because when I was watching the getting caught up on the Eccleston episodes, I did watch them really slowly. Like it was like one every couple other days, or when it was actually when they were showing the reruns at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I think it was. I was really excited because I saw like the end of one episode, and it's like two and it's like in the next episode, and it was the end of the Earth where they go to the space station. And I remember watching that when I remember watching it on TV and just sitting there with this like fresh excitement that I was just like I was, oh my god. And then I watched it again on Netflix, and I had that same excitement because I just remember how wonderful that episode with all the different creatures and all the characters and the creepy ass last human.
Oh, Lady Cassandra.
Lady
Yes.
Cassandra.
What I could suggest, if you just go to your libraries, like your local book library, a lot of libraries have adopted DVD donations, so you might luck out and there might be some Doctor Who DVDs there.
Our local library's kind of strapped for selection. They're more of a kids library. It's mostly geared toward I live in a suburb, so it's mostly like little kids. So it's a lot of like The Hungry Caterpillar and
which was one of my favorite books as a child.
Yeah.
Also, just getting back to the fan-made ones, some fans did make a regeneration between Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee, and John Pertwee actually agreed to do it. And that is the last known time that John Pertwee played the Doctor, and it was showed the actual regeneration sequence between Troughton to Pertwee.
Gosh.
And that's a fan-made movie that has the actual actor in it, so it's almost canon.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah.
We shall go
Right.
forth and
So, have we all spoken? We've all said our piece?
Think so.
Next week, I'm unsure of next week's topic, depending on guests. I'll have to follow up. But we need a sign-off. Did you all get the message for my sign-off, my potential sign-off?
I don't remember if I did.
Right. You're familiar with the two Ronnies, right? It's Good Night from me and it's Good Night from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a version of that where I would just say, and we would vary from one person to I would say, I haven't been Dave. Then you would say,
I haven't been Ian.
No. There's two other people here.
You got it wrong.
Well, I haven't been them either. Who am I supposed to say? I'm not. Am I supposed to not have been a particular one?
Well, I would say that. Then you would say, for example, Maddie or Zach. Then
Okay.
Maddie would say, I haven't been Zach, and then Zach would say, and I haven't been any of them. Good night, and we would change it from week to week.
Right. Okay.
Will we try that again? I'll say Maddie this time. I'll start with Maddie.
Okay.
I haven't been Matty.
I haven't been Zach.
I haven't been Dave.
And I haven't been any of them.
Good night, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.